How to control the pace of your novel. Have you ever been reading a novel and it just isn't picking up? It's getting slower and slower as you go. By the time you get to the third act, it is just as slow as the beginning. Can this happen to your novel? Can this stop your novel from being published? We're going to be answering that question and more, and we're starting right now. You have to look at your novel as though it was gears in a car going from 1 up to 5. When you start off, you want to start off in 1 and move to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th through Act 1, 2, and 3. You want to feel as though the pace of your novel is picking up, just like a car would if you switch from gear 1, 2, 3, and up to 5. The car gets faster and faster. And so should your novel. You don't want to have your novel just as slow at the end as it is in the beginning. In the beginning of your novel is when you introduce characters. You introduce the setting. You give the reader time to get to know who the people are by showing them living their lives. It's like that old saying, show, don't tell. You don't want to tell people who your characters are. You want the reader to know who the characters are through their actions. But by the time you get into the second act, we now have introduced a problem. The characters now have to start solving that problem. They have to start moving faster. To give you an example, think of the movie Alien. It starts off with a group of humans going to a planet investigating a distress signal, and they bring back an alien on board, in which the alien starts attacking them, in which they have to get away. Now, if you noticed in this movie, the pace starts picking up and it gets faster and faster. It starts off slow, allowing us to we're given time to get to know the characters in the beginning. But as the alien starts attacking, the pace pickens up. And by the time you get to the third act, the editing is faster. The music is faster. The characters are literally now running. In the beginning of the movie, they walked slowly. By the end, they're literally running. And this wasn't by coincidence. Ridley Scott, the director, he knew what he was doing. He wanted his movie to start off slow and get faster as it goes, like a car switching gears. You as the viewer can sense this. You can feel the movie moving faster. Can you imagine if in the third act, the characters stopped to talk about something and going into detail about it? It would have killed the momentum. This would be like you driving a car, going from first gear, second, third, fourth, and then back down to 1. You don't do that. When you're a race car driver, you start off in 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 5, getting faster and faster. Imagine if you were on a roller coaster and it was going really fast. All of a sudden, it slows down. A roller coaster starts off slow, going up, getting louder as it goes. And there's a brief moment at the top when it hangs there, when everybody feels suspense. And then it drops. And it goes up and down and around really fast until the very end. But what a roller coaster does not do is start off slow, get to the top, go down really fast, and then slow down and get fast. Slow down and get fast. Once it gets going, it gets going. Just like your novel. You don't want your novel starting slow, building suspense, giving time for the reader to get to know the characters, only to then have it start getting going and it's fast and exciting, only to then slow it back down and bring it back down to gear 1. It kills the momentum. This is what the reader does not want. They want to be able to sense that your novel is getting faster with shorter chapters. You want the characters moving more. You want them having to solve the problem. Imagine reading a mystery novel where the characters have to find and defuse a bomb. In the beginning of the novel, that's when we get to know the characters. We get to know who they are through their actions. But when they figure out where the bomb is, and they have to get there before the bomb explodes, you don't want to slow down the novel by having the characters talking about their past lives or what they did as children. This would absolutely kill the momentum of your novel. The reader would be looking at it saying, what's going on here? Imagine if your novel had a musical score. In a movie like Alien, the music gets louder and faster and more intense. It starts off quiet, gets a little bit louder in the second act, and is really loud and fast in the end. What would be the musical score to your novel? Would it start off slow, with the music getting louder in the middle, and then really loud at the end? Or would your novel have slow music in the beginning, louder, but then all of a sudden go back to being slow and quiet? It would hurt the flow and the feel of your novel if that happened. Look at your novel in 3 acts, the first, second, and third. The first act is the introduction of the characters and the problem. The second act is the tension, the building of problems. And then the third act is when everything comes to head, when the good guy and bad guy have to face each other. You want your first act to be gear 1 and 2. You want your second act to be 3 and 4. And then you want the third act of your novel to be gear 5, when everything is at its fastest. Have someone else read your novel and ask them, how did it feel? How did the pacing of the novel feel? Did it feel like a car getting faster? And a literary agent is going to point this out to you right away. But you want to ask a friend to read your novel first and ask them when they finish it, how did you feel about the pacing? Because as a writer, it's difficult to know if your novel is actually getting faster or slower. Because you know that old saying, you can't see the forest because of the trees? This happens with your novel. Sometimes you get so much into it that you don't know if the pace is slowing down. Have someone else read it and say, did you feel as though the middle was picking up? Was the last act the fastest? And if they say no, have them point out where. Go back and reread your novel as though you're someone else. And imagine and feel, yes, you agree with that, your friend of yours, saying that the middle began to slow down. What changes can you make to actually start picking up the pace? When you're writing a novel, you don't want the beginning to be just as fast as the end. Because in that case, you don't have time to get to know anybody. The characters are hollow. You don't care if anything bad happens to them because you haven't had time to connect. This is what the first and second gear does. It gives you, the reader, time to connect with the characters. So when they're in danger at the end, we truly turn the page, wanting to find out if they're safe. But if your novel is fast at the beginning, slow at the end, you're missing the whole point. You don't want your novel to start on first, fifth, second, first, bouncing all over the place. You want a steady incline. You want to start off 1, 2, 3, up to 5. Make sure somebody else reads it and say, does it feel like the gears in a car getting faster from 1 to 5? If not, find the areas that have that problem and correct them. And don't feel as though this only applies to thrillers. You can have a comedy and it can work just as fine. Look at the funny movie called A Fist Called Wanda. It starts off slow with the characters talking. We have time to get to know them. And then there's the bank robbery, in which there's a lot of backstabbing, lying. It's a funny movie. And by the end, they then have to race to the airport to get the diamonds. You can actually feel the pace of this comedy getting faster as it goes. The same thing with the movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It starts off with a car driving to the insane asylum, and it's going slow. There's a lot of talking. We have time to get to know the characters. And by the end of the movie, when there's all chaos and fighting, you can actually feel the pace of the movie picking up. But at no point did the movie go from gear 4 or 5, then quickly down to 1. It went from 1 and went up to 5 steadily throughout the movie, just like all successful movies and novels. And this doesn't apply to movies and books made today. In fact, you can look back at William Shakespeare, and everything that he wrote had the same thing. When you look at Romeo and Juliet, you have the introduction of the characters in the beginning, and by the end, it's a lot faster than the beginning. Read Romeo and Juliet, and you will see that there is this feeling of getting faster and moving forward. As a writer, you want your story to feel like this as well. You want it to feel like a car moving forward, getting faster. This is what will make the person reading turn the page, because they want to see how this is going to end. But don't slow it down though. One of the big problems with novels is flashbacks. Flashbacks can truly hurt your novel because it's just information being dumped onto the reader about what happened in the past. It's really difficult for a reader to sense tension when talking about the past. So you don't want to have a flashback with information dump in the middle of your story, because that is bringing your car right back down to gear number 1 as you went from 1, 2 to 3, especially in the third act. You never want to have information dumps at the ending of your novel that profoundly hits the brakes on the car. Forget about gear 1. You're bringing your car to a stop. And there's nothing worse than reading a novel that you can feel the pace getting faster and faster, only until you get to the very end and it stops, because the writer decided to spend the next 2 or 3 paragraphs describing the history of some location, building, and that momentum that you built up comes to a stop. It's like being on a roller coaster, going really fast, up and down, and all of a sudden the roller coaster stops. And then it picks up again. It kills the momentum of the roller coaster. And it would with your book. If your protagonist has to finally confront the bad guy in a castle where everyone's life is in danger, where the reader is scared what's going to happen, and then all of a sudden as a writer you take that time to describe the history of the castle, who built it, how it was built, the parts that went into it, how long it's been around, this absolutely will kill the momentum of your novel. Can you have information on how the castle was built? By who? Yes, you can have that in the beginning, in gear 1 or 2. But when you're up to gear number 5, when everything is on the line, that's not the time to start describing how and why the castle was built. The reader doesn't care. The reader at that point wants to know who's going to win. Is the bad guy going to win or lose? Imagine watching the movie Jaws, when the shark is smashing the boat is sinking, and all of a sudden, Chief Brody starts talking about why he became a police officer, what it was like being a police officer back in New York. The viewer would just sit there and stare at the screen and say, what's going on here? Why are we learning this now? Do we ever hear about Chief Brody talking about being a police officer? Yes, in the beginning. But you don't put it in the last 5 minutes of the movie. If you want to get a great idea of pacing and how a movie begins and gets faster as it goes, watch the movie Jaws. Watch the movie Alien. Both of them are great examples of starting in gear 1, making your way up to gear number 5, and not slowing it down at any point. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my blog. I'll leave a description right down below, and you can visit it right now and read countless blogs that I have that can teach you to become the greatest writer you can be. Because I want to help you become a great writer. I want to read your novel as fast as possible. Do you want the greatest tip on how to be the greatest writer you can be? Well, be sure to watch my next video. In fact, I'm going to leave a description right here. You can click on it right now and watch that video, and you can learn the greatest tip on how you can become the greatest writer right now.